This is a web lecture video on AutoFill, relative and absolute addressing, and the if function in Microsoft Excel. Let's first look at AutoFill. Many worksheets you create with Excel require the entry of a series of sequential dates or numbers. The AutoFill feature in Excel makes short work of this kind of repetitive task. All you have to do is enter the starting value or values for the series. For example, in this worksheet we want to title the columns with the 12 months of the year and to number the rows from 1 to 20. So we start with the month of January. Then position the mouse pointer to the lower right hand corner of the active cell and click and drag the mouse. Similarly, we can number the rows. When you release the mouse button, Excel will by default either create a series or just copy the initial value. In this case, Excel has just copied the number 1. You can override the default by using the small drop-down menu that appears. For example, if we select Fill Series, we get a sequential series. To create a series that changes by more than just a factor of 1, enter 2 sample values in neighbouring cells that describe the change you want between each value in the series. For example, if I want to create a series increasing by 2 units at a time, I can choose 1 and 3. Make these 2 values the initial selection and then extend the values by dragging the mouse. Frequently, you will need to copy a formula or function you have just created to neighbouring cells that need to perform the same calculation. You can do this using copy and paste or by using the AutoFill feature. For example, here we have our data on the seminar food costs for January, February and March. We want to calculate the total expenditure on each item for the quarter overall. Let's start by calculating the total expenditure on sandwiches by using the sum function. Now we can simply click in the lower right hand corner of a cell and drag through the other cells. Notice that the original formula in cell E4 sums the range B4 to D4. When the formula is copied using AutoFill to cell E5, Excel automatically adjusts the row numbers so the range is now B5 to D5. The row number is also adjusted in the other rows. Likewise, when you copy a formula to a cell range that extends across columns, Excel adjusts the column letters in the copied formulas rather than the row numbers. Because Excel adjusts the cell references in copies of a formula relative to the direction of the copying, the cell references are known as relative cell references. You will find that often when you copy formulas, you will require relative cell references. However, there will be exceptions. For example, if you want to compute what percentage each part is to the total. In the case of our seminar costs data, we can calculate total sales in January as a percentage of the first quarter total with the formula equals B9/E9 in cell B10. However, if we copy this formula by dragging it across to cells C10 and D10, it no longer performs the calculation we want. We need the denominator of the calculation to continue to refer to cell E9, but in cell C10 it now refers to cell F9 and in cell D10 the denominator now refers to cell G9. This is because it is a relative cell reference. To stop Excel from adjusting a cell reference in a formula in any copies you make of the formula, convert the cell reference from relative to absolute. An absolute cell reference does not change when you copy it to other cells. You do this by inserting $signs in front of the column letter and row number. In this case, the correct formula for us to insert in cell B10 is equals B9 slash $E$9. If we now copy this formula across, you will notice the copied formulas in cells C10 and D10 continue to refer to cell E9 in the denominator. It is also possible to use a so-called mixed cell reference. For example, we can put a $sign before the row number but not before the column letter. That will fix the row reference but not the column reference. Similarly, we can put a $sign before the column letter but not before the row number. That will fix the column reference but not the row reference. As an example, let us consider this worksheet here, where in cell B2 we have the formula equals $A2 plus B$1. If we now click on the cell B2, right click and then select copy, then click in cell C3, right click, then we have an option here to either paste the value itself, which is 7, so that will just paste over the number 7, or to paste the formula. So select here to paste the formula, and you'll see that in cell C3 we now have equals $A3 plus C$1. The if function is a function which returns one value if a condition you specify evaluates as true, and another value if that condition evaluates as false. The if function is best explained using an example. Here we have data giving the annual costs of a firm from the year 2000 to the year 2014. If we type in equals if into cell C2 and open parentheses, you will see that Excel tells us in small writing below the selected cell the arrangement of the if function. First, we need to enter what Excel calls a logical test. This is any expression that can be true or false. For example, in this case, we enter B2 is less than or equal to 100. Next, we write comma and then the value if true, i.e. the value we want Excel to report if indeed B2 is less than or equal to 100. In our case, we want Excel to write in text within budget, so we enter that in quotation marks. Then we type comma again and then the value if false. This is the value Excel will report if B2 is not less than or equal to 100, and we want Excel to report over budget in this case. Copying the formula down the column means we can now quickly see whether we were over budget or within budget in each year. Looking again at the form of the if function, we can see that Excel shows the value if true and the value if false in square brackets. This indicates that they are optional. If we omit the value if true argument, then the if function would return a 0 if the logical test is true. Similarly, if we omit the value if false argument, then the if function would return a 0 if the logical test is false. If there is not even a comma following the value if true argument, then the if function would return the word false if the logical test is false. Try this for yourself in Excel to see this more clearly. Finally, note that it is possible to nest one if function inside of another. For example, here we have a very complicated looking if function which is actually a lot more simple than it seems. It simply says that if b2 is greater than 69, this if function will return the letter A. If that condition is not met, then we move to the second if function, stating that if b2 is greater than 59, the if function will return the letter B. If that condition is not met, then the third if function tells us that if b2 is greater than 49, it will return the letter C. And if that condition is not met, then if b2 is greater than 39, it will return the letter D. And if that condition is not met, it will return the letter F. And that concludes this web lecture video on autofill, addressing and the if function.